What perhaps is the most striking about you, in my opinion, is that you have probably been the UK's youngest CEO at just age 11.
Well, I definitely wasn't a stereotypical CEO in the role in that sense at 11 years old. So that's the first thing to say helpful. But as I've kind of grown older, I've started to seek the advice of mentors far more. And I think that mentors are absolutely 100% necessary. A learning experience was really difficult at first. Understanding how to hire people, what to look for, that was kind of difficult. I really don't think that any one person is going to change the world. But I think if you want to see a really big impact on the world, the way to do that is by inspiring lots of people to make their local areas better and create local change. And if you can create local change on a global scale, that will lead to global change. Not only we're currently consuming with ethics and sustainability in mind, but there's going to become a point where all of Gen Z is in the workforce, and then we end up being employees of ethics and sustainability. So we're not going to want to work for companies that aren't aligning themselves with our moral compass.
Okay, hi Jenk. I'm very happy to welcome you to the Shades of Life podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, I'm particularly happy to have you as a guest today because I think we've been connected for a few years now, but that's actually the first time we are meeting face to face. So that's nice.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, definitely. So Jenk, you are only 19 years old, is that correct?
19, yeah.
Great age to be. And you are an incredible young social entrepreneur, public speaker, consultant, and social change activist. And people are going to discover more about you throughout this podcast.
I hope so.
Yes. You just had the honor to be included in the Forbes 30 under 30 list for Europe 2024. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And having known you for a few years, having followed your trajectory, I know it is very well deserved.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
But when one look at your resume, what perhaps is the most striking about you, in my opinion, is that you have probably been the UK's youngest CEO at just age 11. Just saying this is amazing. So could you give us a backstory? How does someone as young as 11 becomes a CEO?
Well, to be fair, I just kind of directly answer that question. I don't even think I knew what a CEO was at 11 years old. I think someone was writing a press article about me, and then they used that as a headline, and that kind of just sticks. Yeah. So I definitely wasn't a stereotypical CEO in the role in that sense at 11 years old. So that's the first thing to say. But to kind of give you like a rundown of how that kind of all kicked off was I kind of went to school, and every Monday morning, the teacher would always ask, so like, what everyone do this weekend? And I would always have kind of slightly different answer to everyone else. I would always say I went to a kind of went to a performance, or I went to this graffiti tunnel, or I went to go see this artist, or something like that. And my friends would always kind of just haven't really having had not done anything, were like, oh, that actually sounds like quite good fun. So then after a couple of weeks, months go by, eventually I kind of become known as someone who knows about these slightly niche, cooler things to do across London for young people. And then from that, I decided, like, well, this is a really cool idea for a company. This, like, why did I decide that? I just thought to myself, like, this website should exist. Why doesn't it exist? Why am I the one who has to like try and find these places?
It's usually how it starts, right? There is a gap, and
exactly, yeah.
Right, yeah.
So then I kind of created a kind of really kind of small primal website called I Cool Kid, and it was just a collection of things to do in London for kids. And then as I started to grow up, and that was like 11, 12 years old. That's where that kind of came from. And then as that started to kind of grow and increase in size and traffic, we started to hire writers. I think we hired our first employee like May of 2016. And so we kind of hired more people, then we had more articles coming out, and then that meant we had more traffic, and then it kind of kept on increasing like that. And then people started to kind of reach out to me and ask me for these kind of very deep kind of moral dilemmas and ask me for advice. And this was especially as I was growing up, especially towards kind of COVID area. And then as alongside people asking me for the help in their own lives, alongside everything that was happening during COVID, I kind of realized like, look, the world is in a pretty shambolic state. And I'm fortunate enough to have the privilege of a platform in the form of a couple thousand followers on Instagram and a website with a bit of traffic. I should really use this to try and make a bigger difference as possible, because people were trying to make a difference with nothing. So I was saying, well, you know what? I've kind of fortunate enough to have the privilege of traffic and attention.
It was already established. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I wanted to kind of use that. And through that is kind of how Thread came about. So we renamed, refocused, repositioned, and restructured iCoolKid. So we renamed it from iCoolKid to Thread, THRED. We refocused all the content to be like 100% social change focused content. And then we repositioned the demographic. It was much older. We try and say like 16 to 28, but really we have people on either end. It's quite hard to judge that now. And then we restructured the company so that we also built a consulting branch alongside that about a year later. So that's kind of how the genesis of Thread and Thread Media kind of came to be. And the way that actually the consulting side came about was because I was often asked for a lot of advice about for older brands and how they can connect to young people. And then I realized that actually I'm in quite a kind of, again, fortunate enough position to be able to speak with quite a lot of kind of backing about young people and what we care about because of the kind of the stuff I've done beforehand. So that's kind of how we got into consulting. And now we help brands reach young people.
Yeah, and that's totally logical. You know, I've spent my whole career in marketing and communication, and you are so well positioned, you know, being a voice and a representative for your generation, because in marketing, we are always looking at the next new generation. So the fact that you've established that super early and you have such, you know, a knowledge and expertise, but also a passion, you know, to be a voice for your generation. I think that's really great. And you've already worked with big companies, haven't you?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate enough to work with companies like Coke, Ogilvy, Microsoft, Dunkin' Donuts, Google, for several years now, actually, Google, Snapchat, Instagram, Meta just recently. Yeah.
And I'll be an advocate for you, you know, if anything comes my way, because
That's very kind of you.
I know you do a great job.
I hope so. That's very kind. Thank you.
I actually wanted to ask you, because I'm going to pronounce this name. How do you pronounce your generation? Because I've heard people say the Generation Z or Generation Z.
Honestly,
what's the correct way?
I always say Z, but I've just spent so much time with Americans over the last couple of weeks in Cannes.
Or is it for Americans? Okay.
Z, Z, everything. I understand it all. So go.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I'll pronounce it Z like in French
perfect.
as well. So
yeah,
European way, we are going to say.
Yes.
So thank you for taking us actually through your trajectory. It's quite interesting also to see almost like the rebranding and the change in directions and the evolution of your venture. That's really, really interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you, so when you spent all these years developing your enterprise, were you still at school, and how did you balance school and, you know, holding business meetings during your teenage school years? Was it an easy balance to find?
Honestly, it would have been very difficult to balance, but I kind of was able to use a couple of like tricks that I like that actually made it quite easy in the end. I find that if you schedule everything, I feel that if you know like what you're going to do in a day, it's a lot easier to do it before it happens, as opposed to kind of just winging it. So I think that's the first thing is scheduling. And then when you're scheduling, you have to think about two things: your priorities and then your balance. And I think the issue is people don't schedule in enough free time for themselves just to do kind of jack. And then at that point, it becomes very difficult because then the free time starts to creep in where it's not meant to. And then that's when you want to start bringing priorities into it. So then when your priorities if you can combine the need for balance and the use of priorities, whether it's like your school, hobbies, friends, sports, music, or business, then the combination of that and a really strong scheduling system will actually kind of you'll find a lot of time in the day to do nothing. You'll have a lot of time in the day to do the things that are important to you, and you'll also know what you're going to do during the day before it happens. So it's a win-win-win.
Yeah, yeah. I find that actually very important. I don't think I mean, perhaps some people are probably naturally good at it. I know I'm not, but this year I've actually made a point to schedule, and plan most of what I do as well, like you're describing. And this is when you can really maximize the time you have and to do the important things that you absolutely want to do. And then any spare free time, that's a bonus, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So another question I wanted to ask you, because again, you started very young. How was your level of confidence throughout the years from when you started and the following years? Was it already there from a young age, or has it grown over time? Because you do also a lot of public speaking.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of the opposite. I was used to be really, really shy as a kid. And then as a way to kind of come out my shell, my parents sent me to like Stagecoach, which is like a drama school in the UK. And I had really bad stage fright, and I was like super, super shy there. And then I kind of started to kind of get into it, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And that's kind of how my confidence started. And then from there, I ended up going into acting as a career for a couple of years. I was fortunate enough to work in kind of commercial TV and the West End, which is pretty awesome. And then after a couple of years, it kind of got into like the point where the stage was like I was in the theater more than I was at home. I was like doing homework in the changing room and then going on stage like 4 nights a week. Like it was kind of hectic, but I loved it. And then that's I think where I got a lot of my confidence from. So it definitely was never. There was a point where none of it was there, and it definitely grew over time, and it continues to kind of grow. I still get nervous. I used to kind of get nervous, but I think I've kind of when I do new types of things, I do sometimes, but it's very rare nowadays.
Yeah. It's been very rare. I haven't seen someone, having a bit of stress or anxiety, when they do, especially things in public, presentation
Yeah.
in public.
Well,
Very
I think
normal.
that my advice for that in general is that I think people it's really I don't want to make it sound worse than it is, but almost kind of irrational fear of public speaking because they kind of convince themselves that there's this huge life-changing negative consequences going to happen if they mess up. And once you kind of get past that, which some people can't get past, but once you're able to get past that, it's actually really, really quite kind of simple. You talk slowly, you talk well, as long as you know exactly what you're talking about, um,
Yeah.
then you're like I think it actually becomes a really really fun thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. I've had the same experience. I've known stage frights. Like, I don't want to do this anymore after doing it for the first time.
Yeah,
And
precisely.
now I enjoy it so, so much. But I think as you said, it's practice, being well prepared, for sure. And then I think the more you do it, personally, it's been like this for me, the more I enjoy it now, to the point that, you still have, a bit of stress, a bit of anxiety, but it's all in preparation, really.
Yeah,
And once you're on the stage, usually it disappears.
yeah, it's
But
so
as you
much more fun.
say, I know people also who have pure anxiety, but it's all in the head.
Exactly. I think you create your own anxiety around with
Yeah,
public speaking. There's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's nice to hear about your experience about this. So, how important have your parents and other mentors been for you during that time frame since you started? Because I've heard you referring to your parents, the support of your parents, but also the support of mentors and how important it has been for you since you started. So, could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about this?
I think that when I was younger, yeah, definitely like my parents were massively supportive and super helpful. But as I've kind of grown older, I've started to seek the advice of mentors far more. And I think that mentors are absolutely 100% necessary. And also because you can really kind of tap into it, people of different industries and different kind of places of work and really different skill sets. I mean, like the benefits of having them completely like cannot be overstated. I feel like they've been integral. I mean, there's some really kind of easy statistics to try and convince you. Mentees are promoted 5 times more often than people who don't have mentors. You're something like 40% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down, which then increases to 70% if your goals are also shared with a mentor. And I don't remember the last. It's like 84%, I think, of mentors said that they've helped avoid kind of 84% of mentees have said that mentors have helped them avoid kind of really bad career mistakes. So
Okay.
I think one of the first pieces of advice I ever give is start with one mentor, like get them as soon as possible, and then look to build a team of them over time in different kind of areas, ages, life experiences, who you kind of feel comfortable talking to. But it's a really, really good thing to get started.
Yeah. I mean, on the podcast, we always talk about the power of collaborations. And I love this aspect with mentorship because, as you said, that's just so important. And that's part of the overall picture and how it can support you in life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So young entrepreneurship is a key focus for you, Jenk, and I know you enjoy talking about the future of Generation Z, young entrepreneurship, social change, and youth employment, with the hope of helping other young people develop their impactful ideas, just like you did yourself. So what would be your number one advice for other budding young entrepreneurs who would want to bring to life their own startup or enterprise like you did? Any piece of advice?
I think the piece of advice I would give, and I still think about this occasionally, is don't fear failure, but be terrified of regret. And it's very, very cheap nowadays to fail, but it's kind of especially cheap when you think of it in comparison to a life of regret. And you always want to think about, like, would you rather be the person that thought about it or the person that did it? Because a lot of these times, especially when talking about entrepreneurship, it's not about the person with the best idea. It's about the person who can execute their idea the quickest and the best. In the same way that I think my favorite example of this is something like Starbucks. Starbucks was like the first ever cafe where they just kept sofas and chairs and seats and had Wi-Fi. Like, I mean, it didn't even have Wi-Fi in the first Starbucks. It was literally just the cafe where someone just decided to keep the chairs and sofas and tables in. And that's how Starbucks was created. And I guarantee you the person who made Starbucks wasn't the first person to think we should have a sofa in here. It was the first person who did it and put the sofa in there. So I think that is a kind of a good example of about the kind of difference between fearing failure and fearing regret. But equally, I think just in general, when you talk about young entrepreneurship, I think there's a lot of like misunderstanding, maybe from older generations, maybe even from our generation. But I think it's worth kind of emphasizing, at least, that entrepreneurship doesn't have to look like the kind of stereotypical kind of rose to riches kind of career path where you create a company, you kind of find investors, you kind of get an evaluation, and then you kind of acquire or get acquired, and then you kind of build this huge corporation. That's not what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is selling your clothes on Depop. Entrepreneurship is working gig, working freelance. Entrepreneurship is kind of coding in your room to kind of build a small website. Like, entrepreneurship it actually takes so many more shapes and sizes than what we think of as stereotypical entrepreneurship. And I think that in itself has become way, way, way easier for the last 10 years. I mean, the advent of cloud computing has meant that for the cost of failure 10 years ago was 10 times higher than it is now, which either means you can start and fail one company for a tenth the price, or you can start and fail 10 times more companies for the same price. So I think
that's a really nice way to put it.
Yeah, there's no better time to get started. So is another piece of advice I'd say. And I think that it's just kind of doesn't not need to be suits and ties in a big office. Entrepreneurship takes so many different forms. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love the pieces of advice. I really think we are living at times when we are almost like, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but exploding the old stereotypes or ways of doing things. And you've put this perfectly together. It's like thinking outside of the box, and you don't have to do things in like what was in a classic way. We'll talk about gaps in generations later, but I think that's part of it. So I'm going to brace myself for the next question. So creative endeavors seem to have taken a big place in your life. And when I researched you, your creative CV is quite remarkable, I must say, in addition to being an entrepreneur. So I'm only gonna do this for your creative CV. But I'm going to do a list of what you have on it. So you trained at the likes of the Juilliard School in New York City, the National Youth Music Theatre in New York as well.
That was London, but yeah.
Oh, London, sorry. The Sylvia Young Theatre School, Young Actors Theatre in Islington, the Pineapple Dance Studio, the Royal Academy of Dance, the Song Academy, the Rhythm Studio, the London Sound Academy. You have studied music theory, singing, acting, street dance, ballet, tap, jazz. You play 4 instruments to a high level. You must tell us which ones. You are a DJ as well. And you have worked professionally in TV, film, West End theater, documentaries, commercials, print and video campaigns, music videos. You recorded original music and done film voice over work. Oh my God. I love your creative CV, honestly. That's a lot for a young person, especially considering, you have been an entrepreneur all these years. So one thing I wanted to ask you, because I love creative endeavors, I love the arts. So how important are these creative endeavors for you? And would you say that overall in your life, creativity is a big driver of who you are and for what you do and want to do?
Yeah, I think creativity is kind of a massive part of what I do. It used to be more so, and then now I kind of shifted myself to more consultancy. It's less so, saddening, but no, it is still kind of a really big part of what I do.
Yeah.
And
okay.
yeah, like it's pretty awesome. Like you asked about the instruments. Piano is my best, and then I also did jazz saxophone, drums, and guitar for a while. But piano is by far my best.
Okay.
But yeah, look, I think that these things are all in their own way kind of helps me kind of through or like get to different places or kind of helped in some way or another. But they just happen to be a collection of things that I was able to kind of try and absolutely love. So a lot of what you kind of read out is actually just the kind of accumulation of kind of hours of practice and just really a lot of enjoyment and love of the game.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think it gives you another dimension as well with everything else you do. And you seem to be a person who is really living life to the maximum of its possibilities, like almost.
Well, I really tried to kind of the way I see it is that because I love it so much, it never feels like work. And don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
what I do as
right.
work, I also love, but that does sometimes feel like work. But with music and creativity, especially DJing now, I can do it at night. It doesn't interfere with anything apart from the fact that maybe I sleep less than I should, and I'm able to kind of still do thread and still do the consulting and kind of keep up the creativity side as well.
Awesome. So let's talk work then. You are the founder and CEO of Thread Media, a 100% social change focused enterprise that specializes in publishing, consulting, and production and aimed at Generation Z. So can you tell us overall what you aim to do with Thread Media, if you want to summarize that for you? What's your mission with it?
Yeah, so thread.com, Thread itself is a kind of, as you said, a 100% social focused website. And the idea with that is to kind of inform, impact, and inspire the most amount of like-minded people possible. Because at the time, and I still believe this, I really don't think that any one person is going to change the world. But I think if you want to see a really big impact on the world, the way to do that is by inspiring lots of people to make their local areas better and create local change. And if you can create local change on a global scale, that will lead to global change. So we wanted to make a website that would kind of encourage people to make their local area better, and that was Thread. And now Thread Media is a full service media company that's dedicated to the understanding, employing, and developing of Generation Z. So it's kind of a place where we have the opportunity to create work that looks and feels like Gen Z and moves with the social purpose that Thread has, but we're moving with it in a consulting aspect as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
And we're now in kind of, I think the thread.com itself. So Thread is in kind of over 200 different kind of countries and territories. We're in 17 different languages. And yeah, we have yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Absolutely awesome and great mission. For me, it's all about inspiring people as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
So do you see yourself as an important voice for Generation Z? And I also wanted to ask you, how would you like to support your generation the most? I think you've just given us some cues on this.
No, it's a quick answer. I really don't think that I'm an important voice for Gen Z, me personally. But I think that what I'm trying to be at least is an amplifier of important voices. And kind of, I really want to use the platform to kind of platform our generation as a whole and platform individuals and their social change work and their voices by giving them a platform to do so as well. So to answer your question, I personally don't think that I'm an important Gen Z voice by any stretch, but I think that I'm able to speak on behalf of a lot of people because I have spent kind of a while now researching and reading and reporting and understanding about young people. And well, and also I am one, which helps. And kind of able to amplify the important voices in our generation too, which I'm honored to do.
I think there is a lot of humility about you, Jenk, and that's something I really like about you.
That's very kind, thank you.
And just the fact you say, I don't think I am, but probably a lot of people think you are, which is natural, by the way.
It's very kind.
It's all good. I will have someone on the podcast in a month, and we're going to talk about ambition and leadership. And I think, leading by example and having that type of people like you who are leading by example, whether you want to say it or not, that's really important to inspire other people and show that it's possible as well. And it's actually possible at any age. And I think you've demonstrated that really nicely.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
So next topic is really interesting. So January 1st, 1983 is considered the official birthday of the internet. And we all know how much it has changed our lives ever since. So that was just over 30 years ago. And as we said, you are only 19 years old. So you say that you are 22 years younger than the internet. And we all know that Generation Z are called the digital natives, the first generation to grow up with the internet as part of their daily lives. How would you say, I know it's a big question, so answer it as you wish with your own angles, but how would you say the internet and the digital world has shaped who you are?
I think that it's definitely shaping me in a different way, probably every day. I think that the aspects of the internet that's probably shaped me and arguably most young people the most is social media. Admittedly, obviously, I'll start by admitting it's got a lot of very, very bad effects as a whole, but it has also narrowed a cataclysmic gap, and it's provided the beginnings of what we're seeing of this kind of democratization of education for those who obviously have the internet, which is, for reference, I think about 2/3 of the planet. So it means that all of a sudden, what was limited to people in developed countries and actually often arguably from kind of privileged families in terms of education, opportunity, networking, actually through the internet, through social media, has now been able to be accessed by far, far more people around the world. I mean, previously you would have to kind of, to become high levels of finance knowledge, you would have to kind of go to university and have a finance professor teach you everything you would need to know. But in actuality, now that you can Google or you can YouTube most of these professors' lectures, you can find them on Masterclass, on LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Skillshare, Udemy. I mean, there's countless numbers of these websites now, and where you can sign up to courses and educate yourself in things which you previously never would have had access to, and people that you never would have had access to. I mean, you can get like Martin Garrix to teach you how to produce house music. So that is definitely, I think, the way that the internet has shaped me the most. I would argue is that it's this kind of general wave of democratization of education. But me personally, it's allowed me to understand how to kind of manage people and understand people and kind of be a leader, hopefully, which I'd argue, I think it's taught me that. And also I've learned about public speaking. I've learned about music production and DJing and stuff that I'm able to do to a level of which the internet has basically allowed me to get to. So that was a bit of a rambly answer, but I think
that's great. It's really great.
It explains kind of how this democratization of education works. And actually also, I spoke about this kind of really in depth on a TED talk, but this idea of collectivism and this idea that social change has now permeated the internet spaces so much more recently is equally a very good example of how social media has shaped the way that we all live.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can certainly relate a lot to your first point, despite not being Generation Z. But when I moved from France to the UK, my level of English was probably not as good as today. And I've been put in touch with a lot of ideas that we didn't forcefully have in France through the British culture, but also, other English-speaking cultures like the US. And, it was so easy to be in contact with authors and, thought leaders and etc. And for me, it has really played a big role in my life as well. So I think a lot of people will relate to what you just described. The next question is one to try to understand the generational differences, but also to aim to understand each other better. So what do you think are the biggest differences or impacts you see between Generation Z, like you, and Generation X, like me, due to this early integration of the digital communication platforms into your life? I don't think a generation, like me, who didn't grow up with, I'm not a digital native, and things were very different, in my teens. I don't think I'm really asking the question so that, there will be people of various ages watching this podcast. And it's really interesting for me to have your perspective of what you think are the differences.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but I actually don't think that Gen Z.
I'm not looking for any, sir.
I don't think that Gen Z is very different to any of the other generations, to be honest. I think everyone's growing up in their teens wanting to change the world and kind of be the zeitgeist of their society that they're going to grow up into. So people have been processing about social change for so many decades. And this is, by the way, normally answered because a lot of people think that Gen Z is like this super giga woke generation. And actually, we all were we all wanted to be the change makers and the leaders and thought leaders of our generation at that age. We just happen to be able to do it louder with better technology and bigger and broader results. So I actually don't think the Gen Z is that different in a huge amount of ways. I think there's a couple of things that make us variably different. And I think that those are the effects of the financial crash, a decade of social activism, being the first generation of digital natives, lots of world conflicts on a pretty mass scale, and then COVID as well. So those are things that are specific to our generation, which you could argue have shaped us in some ways. But I think in general, we're actually not that different. I think you're just seeing us as different because, not you specifically, I'm just saying we're seen as different because we're doing the same things on a much bigger scale.
Yeah, I love the answer, I must say, because I do think as well that we tend to see the differences bigger than they are. And I think you're absolutely right. We all grow up with similar dreams. Perhaps the tools have changed, the moments in history have obviously, you know, been different when growing up, but I think overall you're right. Yeah. Okay, so next question. So I've got this quote from you when you said, if we are to achieve lasting impact for efforts, then this generation, and you're talking about Generation Z, must spare the sometimes unfocused energy of digital media and combine it with long-standing principles for building and sustaining social campaigns. I think that's a quote that is on your website, so it's probably important to you.
I think it was from the TED Talk originally, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I think with this quote, you really refer to the fact that, you know, digital social media platforms can be addictive, as we all know, and I think that's intergenerational for sure. And we can endlessly be scrolling our phones. So, you know, do you think that people of your generation, but I think it can apply to anybody in general, do we spend too much time on our phones and perhaps we don't maximize enough our time and what we do with our time on this planet? Is it the kind of overarching idea also of why you started Fred Media in the first place?
I kind of think, to your original question about whether we spend too much time on our phones, I think yes and no. I think that for the first time, almost ever, and actually, I'm going to link this back to the earlier question about young entrepreneurship and how that has kind of changed the way it looks. A lot of the time we spend on our phone, you can't correlate 100% of our screen time to being 100% ineffective or unproductive. Because actually, because of this surge of young entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, as they're kind of called, actually, if you're selling clothes on Depop or you're selling your kind of crochet on Etsy, or you're doing something with a level of entrepreneurship, which I would argue still makes you an entrepreneur, a lot of that, or if you're posting a brand deal with another brand on your Instagram, or if you're an influencer or anything like that, I would think that I would argue that a lot of that happens on your phone, which is why Generation Z has this anxiety about being away from their phone, is because a lot of the time, well, their phone is their work, it's their play, it's their contact with everyone on the planet who they will know, and have ever met before. It's every photo they've ever taken. It's the answer to every question that's ever been asked. And now it's also one of the most powerful AI intelligences on the planet that you can all have on your phone at the same time. So I think that it's an unfair reflection on Gen Z to assume that our phone time is linked to a lack of productivity. So, but equally, I am very unproductive on my phone quite a lot of the time. So obviously there's balance. But
again, I really love the answer. I always say that, you know, everything is a tool and you can use it in any way you want, and it can be productive or unproductive. And it's true for probably almost everything. So
precisely,
I like the answer. So talking about leading a purpose-driven life, a little bit of history, because when I first came to the UK, it was actually in my early 20s, so I was not very far from you in age today. And I remember I've been really impressed by people's involvement in charities in the UK in general, which we didn't have at the same level in France, I would say. And for me, it is something that's very embedded in the British culture as I see it. And I think it's probably notoriously through the impulse of the royal family, and there is a whole heritage in the UK through the royals. And with today, the fact that we are faced with many global crises, and the fact that we would benefit from many people stepping up and using their media, their voice, their time to grow awareness and creative positive change at scale. I wanted to ask you, you know, for people who perhaps today don't use their time purposefully to create, you know, a difference, whether it's socially, environmentally, and, you know, we are not pointing a finger to anybody, but I just wanted to ask you, because you are doing so much, and sometimes I see people who are very have great messages around impact and purpose and the benefits it can have in your own life. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say to people who perhaps, you know, are not as focused on impact and purpose? What would you say to them about what would be the benefits for them to perhaps integrate more purpose and impact into their lives?
Well, I think that I want to kind of clarify. By the way, first, I'm sorry I keep flicking my hair back. I haven't had a haircut so long. But I think that to answer your question, I think there's a difference that you have to kind of make there. I think impact is specifically what I've derived purpose and fulfillment from. But purpose itself or fulfillment, you can kind of derive that from anything. So I think that seeking fulfillment should really be the ultimate goal. And that should be measured as a combination of a bunch of things. I mean, whether it's health, wellness, self-love, purpose, or kind of like the positive contribution you have, so the impact. It can be any really of those factors. I just so happen to derive mine from the impact that I'm able to create. But a lot of people might not. But I think finding fulfillment should still be a goal. The issue with that is that a lot of people misinterpret fulfillment for happiness. And when people start chasing happiness, issues arise where it's just not healthy because it's impossible to have a great day every day. So then you end up in a lot of these, you end up in a lot of these mental ups and downs where you're looking for happiness, but you know, sometimes you should have a bad day. Like that's so okay as well, by the way. But that's just not really a healthy way of seeking fulfillment through happiness. You seek fulfillment through this kind of sense of purpose and self-love and positive contribution and health and wellness, not happiness, because some days are just shitty days.
Yeah, very, very true. I love your spin on that one. Very good.
Thank you.
So I think you touched base on this earlier. So let's dive into this question a little bit more. How do you think can social media today help with social activism and building social campaigns? And do you have any tips to do it in the most effective way possible? So if, for example, someone today wants to create a campaign to support a cause, where should they start? What should they do? What would be the most effective approach in your opinion?
Great question. I'm going to shamelessly plug my TED talk. It's called Can I Like Change the World? And I just talk about collectivism and exactly the answer to that question. But I'm happy to kind of give you like a kind of a summary of that. So if I go on for too long, it's because I've gone into the TED talk mode.
No, go ahead, and I will put the reference to the TED talk in the comments.
So basically, collectivism is kind of what you're describing. It's a word you use to describe any form of online social activism, which could be social change hashtags, viral videos, I mean, even Snapchat filters. Like it really could be anything. Online petitions, a really good example. And those are a staple of how Gen Z brings about change. But you are kind of right to ask whether it has an impact, because there is this kind of constantly mounting evidence to suggest that online activism is far more effective than some may assume, but equally far less effective in other areas. So, I mean, like over the last 10 years, collectivism has been a really powerful tool to spread little known ideas and kind of publicize non-mainstream causes that don't get the attention they deserve. I mean, obviously, like the title of the talk was like, "Can a like change the world?" I don't think can a tweet change the world? I don't think one post or one tweet can, but millions of them often do. I mean, we've seen kind of policies changed instantly. You've seen kind of cultures turn. People end up in prison after kind of enough people talk about something. Like there is actually a huge amount of impact. But the issue is that you end up kind of in a situation where the things that you're fighting for end up having there's so much happening in the world, and a lot of it is kind of negative, and you feel like you want to contribute to all of the things that you're trying to, and then you end up getting in this position where you lose a lot of the engagement you have for each different issue because you're spread so thinly across lots of different issues. And this is kind of just sense of doom scrolling. The more you kind of, I mean, like my Instagram is just depressing, the stories to go through. There's like just everything is kind of going wrong right now. Okay. So this is what's led to this kind of sense of massive eco anxiety and social anxiety and just anxiety about growing up. I mean, I know a lot of people who have said they won't have kids because they don't want the kids to be kind of born into the world which their parents have created. So it's just two sides of the same coin. We've been able to do a lot more, but also the things that we do are starting to kind of they fizzle out much quicker, and there's far fewer engagements with them now. If that makes sense, not being too depressing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thank you for this insight.
No, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add the link to the TED Talk. I haven't watched it myself, so I must.
Oh yeah, no, definitely do.
So, Jenk, I have seen you posting about what you call a growing large-scale loneliness epidemic amongst young people, despite the seemingly digital connection your generation enjoys. So would you say it is a side effect of the digital world? Where does it come from? And perhaps what would be the remedies to that?
I think it's a combination of digital advances and COVID. And I know this is ironic saying this over a Zoom call, but I think COVID, we thought that we could replace genuine human interaction with things like Zoom. That's why Zoom became popular. With things like FaceTime or phone calls or emails or kind of TikToks or Snapchat or anything like that. The things that blew up are, I think, that we thought that we could replace genuine human interaction with. And it kind of worked for a while. People felt like they weren't like alone, but then actually loneliness on the other end of it really increased, because what we realized was that the level of the facade was just not like broken down in Zooms or emails or kind of, or even video game calls over your headset or stuff like that. Like I played so many video games with my friends. Like we call every night till like 3 a.m. during COVID, just playing video games with each other. But like, and like it was so much fun. But at the end of the day, like we thought it would replace human interaction, but it just doesn't. And then equally, once it all goes away after COVID, you're then stuck having not really been out of the house that much for a couple of years. And you're kind of like trying to rebuild, like a lot of people had social anxiety after COVID. And it just really ruined our ability to see each other and see our friends and just chat to people in real life. So that's kind of where I think this loneliness is derived from, is the fact that we thought that we could replace human interaction, realized quite quickly we couldn't, and then didn't really know what to do after that.
Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind, that we need to keep the human interactions going and not replace them with
precisely.
Yeah. So, Jenk, you have received many accolades, a lot of press coverage. Your company, Fred Media, has also won many awards, which is great. And again, congratulations on this trajectory so far. And to be honest, there has been so many that I cannot possibly take the time to list them on this podcast. But I wanted to ask you, which ones have perhaps been the most significant to you so far, and why?
I could never choose. I think any amount of press or accolades that you get, I'm super, honestly, firstly grateful for, super privileged and honored to be able to kind of say that I have that many. But I think as long as it draws more attention to the work that we're doing, and the kind of especially the consulting work, actually specifically from a brand perspective, I think is just always a plus. Yeah. Equally, I think that a lot of them I kind of got because I was so young at the time. But in hindsight, and I try and say this as much as possible, I find that my age actually just massively helps you. You can take way more risks when you're younger. People are more willing to help you when you're younger.
Yeah.
People are kind of just nicer to you. They give you more advice. And equally, you're able to get so much more attention for doing it because of your age, that in turn helps you massively to spread the word. So I don't know if I could choose a favorite. If I had to choose, the Forbes recently was quite cool, but I think that's I'm grateful for all of them, and to be able to say that I have a choice between accolades in itself is slightly mind blowing.
That's a lovely answer,
yeah.
Jenk. Lovely. Yeah, really lovely. So you touched base on this earlier, but you speak to a large audience, not only through your speaking activities at global conferences, but also through Fred Media. And it is now, I think you mentioned this, available in 17 different languages. It reaches over 350,000 teens and young adults from over 220 countries or territories every month. So congratulations again on
Thank
this
you.
reach. How important was it for you, for Fred Media, to include so many languages? Because I do remember the day when you launched the site in all these languages and how
I
excited you
remember it.
were.
Yeah, I was very, very excited. And I think it was really,
Yeah.
really important to us, which is why I try and mention it as much as possible. And it's important for a couple of reasons. Uh, I said it, I kind of touched on this earlier, but I was talking about like the democratization of education and how important I found it was to, if you have connectivity, which two-thirds of the world do, to be able to get all the knowledge to you in those parts of the world. You obviously can only do once you have the internet. It also needs to be in a language you understand. So the countries that needed the most amount of kind of social change or the biggest kind of inspiration and education and information actually often weren't the countries who spoke English, unfortunately. So, I mean, the US is the world leader in social change, and the UK and Australia are not, and Canada are not kind of far behind. Whereas a lot of the other European countries, and especially kind of the kind of further West, Eastern Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries, we found super, super important to be at least be able to have a language as a second language, which they can read it in. So that was kind of a really big deal for us, was to be able to get the information and the inspiration, hopefully, to the countries that we felt needed the most, or at least more than the US, the UK, Australia, and Canada.
And do you measure that? Did you see this happening since you've launched, all these
Yeah, I mean,
languages?
we have like actually every day, like every couple of days now, I have like an email saying someone from Trinidad and Tobago has signed up to a newsletter, or someone like these kind of wonderful countries of which I never would have been able to kind of access without being in so many different languages.
Amazing. Yeah, I love it. So part of your work focuses on better understanding Gen Z beliefs, behaviors, and upcoming consumer trends. We talked about your work as a consultant now, which is really interesting. If you were to pick three things you'd really like people to know about your generation, Generation Z, what would it be and why?
I think the first thing would just to be repeat kind of what I said earlier about okay, actually no. Firstly, I think it's not one of my answers, but we are by no means a monolith. So whenever I speak about Gen Z, it's by no means to say that everyone is like this exclusively.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who aren't, but there are some trends. Obviously, I think the first thing I'm going to repeat is that we're the only generation to have a certain amount of things happen. So the financial kind of crisis, the kind of then you have the pandemic, several kind of borderline world war conflicts, but almost at that point, and then COVID as well. So we've learned to do less, spend less, and waste less as a result of those things. Young people, kind of from every generation, have always kind of, like I said, like embodied the world that they want to grow up into, but we especially do that through those three things. Equally, sustainability, because of those three things, sustainability has had this kind of really generational impact on our generation. Again, I couldn't tell you why, apart from the fact that we clearly just want to do less, spend less, and waste less. And you could probably draw reasons for that from all the different things we've had to go through. But sustainability is probably one of the biggest issues to us in the world, and it's also led to this huge element of kind of eco anxiety and people wanting to kind of better the world that their kids are going to grow up into. And looking ahead, I think that there's, I mean, a couple different kind of big trends happening. I think this idea of kind of possession versus buying. So we're kind of moving away from kind of possession and buying things to having access to them. If that makes sense. So I mean, this is why things like Spotify or Netflix or WeWorks or kind of gyms are becoming much more kind of potent. Is because potent's not the right word. Popular is because we don't need to own the rights to the music anymore, like iTunes. We don't need to buy the DVDs anymore. But actually, we want to just be able to rent the films, like, or just stream them, like on Netflix, or stream the music, like on Spotify. Or we want to just be able to kind of go into work every couple of days, or work from home another couple of days, as opposed to kind of renting out an office and kind of going into work as an office and owning that office space. Likewise with entrepreneurship, you don't necessarily need to own the servers anymore, but you can rent the servers. So this kind of Uber, you don't need to own the car, you can rent the car, or like
There is
Zip
more
or whatever the cars.
flexibility. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot more flexibility. It's a lot more sustainable. So that kind of goes back to that point. And it's a lot of things that those are kind of all the things GenZ care about. And that's why that's kind of become a thing. Idea and kind of as well, this consumption has become a expression of personality and ethics as well as of recently. And this is what's led to this idea of kind of both cancel culture and this idea that these companies are really starting to fail if they don't align themselves with the ethics of the consumers that they're looking to sell to. It's why like Shein is having such a rough time right now, is because they're trying to sell fast fashion to a generation that hates fast fashion. So
why are they so successful then?
well, they're very successful because you have to pair our consumption as a way of kind of showing our ethics, and then you have to try and draw a balance between that and also the fact that we are going into the world of work. We don't have a huge amount of money, and also the economy in the world is in a pretty terrible state in a lot of countries. So there's an element of I hate doing this, and it's also an element of yeah, but it's a £4 jacket. So that's why they still have the success they do. But equally, everyone is very aware of what's happening, and they're very aware of kind of the effects of fast fashion. But until we can afford to kind of rent and heat houses, you probably still have to succumb in some areas to the corporate machine.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for these points. And I can only encourage anyone who would have some needs to research Generation Z to get in touch with you, because I love your approach. I've seen you also working with people, like Ogilvy, for example, who are the trend company. And you've done wonderful work with them. So I would encourage people to get in touch.
Thank you.
My next question again is more in the context of you, having researched your generation, working with the trends around it. So if we look at youth culture today, and your generation in particular, what are you most proud of today collectively?
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question? I was just taking my headphones off.
So if we look at youth culture today and your generation in particular, I'm going to ask you the next two questions, and if you want to combine, feel free to do so.
Yeah.
So what are you the most proud of today collectively when you look at your generation, perhaps what your generation has accomplished so far? And what are you the most excited about when it comes to future prospects and what you can achieve, again, collectively as a generation?
I think that collectively as a kind of youth, I think the things that I'm most kind of proud to be able to say we did is spread awareness of issues that both on kind of two ends. I've been able to learn about issues that I never would have appreciated because of other young people who are going through those issues and are able to share it and talk about it and hopefully make change to it. Equally, I'm able to share issues that I find super passionate about, or my friends and people around me are super passionate about, to people who never would have heard of them, and kind of vice versa. So collectively, I think this idea that we're able to spread knowledge and disseminate info of specifically about social change quickly, super proud of that. That's us. Go GenZ. I think you were saying about kind of future prospects and what I can achieve, what
the generation can achieve moving forward. I think,
I think as we go into the world of work, I'm really looking forward to seeing, admittedly, what Thread is trying to do now. I'm looking forward to see happen on a mass scale when we go into work and when no one wants, and then there'll come a point where no one wants to work for the Sheins or the Zaras or the anything else of the world. And then they're going to have a real big issue because not only we're currently consuming with ethics and sustainability in mind, but there's going to become a point where all of Gen Z is in the workforce, and then we end up being employees of ethics and sustainability. So we're not going to want to work for companies that aren't aligning themselves with our moral compass. So I'm really looking forward to, in the future, watching us eliminate the bad companies through a lack of employees and youthfulness, and then equally either create or amplify the amount of companies that are doing good in the world. Because there's so many of them, but we're just going to start working for them, and we're going to move into those areas, and if not make more of them. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's one of the things I'm the most excited about as well, you know, the evolution of the workforce and how we spend our times. There are many people who are creating new ventures, but I was looking at an article this morning about a Danish company that started exploiting fossil fuels and totally transitioned their company into wind energy. And, you know,
amazing.
These
there you go. That's exactly what
these transitions are happening. And we are the witness of it now and in the coming years, probably. And that's really exciting.
Yeah.
So going back to your entrepreneur years, what would you say have been your biggest learnings as a young entrepreneur over the past 8 years? If you have to with you.
I think I said this earlier, but take risks young is going to be a really easy one. Take risks young. What else? Don't say yes to everything. That was that really led me to not have enough time to do a lot of things I wanted to do because I was saying yes to too much stuff. So that was one of them. So take risks, don't say yes to everything. And I want to say that like one of my biggest learnings has been trying to understand people. Like being a people manager has been really, really kind of a learning experience. It was really difficult at first. Understanding how to hire people, what to look for, that was kind of difficult. I mean, it's not a difficult task, but I think it was hard to grasp quickly about how important that was. Because really, people management is probably one of the most important aspects of being a team player or a team member or a team manager. So understanding people was probably one of the biggest.
It's often cited as, I think that's the right word, as a struggle by entrepreneurs in general for management. Yeah, definitely. So where would you like to take your trajectory moving forward? Do you think about your next 5 years or your next 10 years, your next 20 years, or do you live really in the moment? You were talking about planning at the beginning of the, or your day-to-day weekly planning at the beginning of the podcast. So do you project what you do and yourself more forward into the future?
I think a couple of years, in 20 years' time, God knows where I'll kind of be or what I'll be doing. But yeah, I think that the way I kind of see this kind of trajectory going is, I think maybe even a split between the consulting and the publishing. Maybe I'm not too sure, but I definitely want to see the publishing grow into this really kind of big behemoth, almost like kind of global citizen level reach. Is another great website. And I want that to really be a good way for people who are slightly interested in activism to become more interested in activism, and the people who are really interested in activism to become even more knowledgeable. So I think my real kind of genesis idea of Thread is that I think that everyone, the good thing with social change is that everyone's kind of facing the same way. Everyone kind of agrees on a lot of the things of social change. It's just if you care about it with a 1, I want to get you to a 3. If you're a 5, I want to get you to an 8. And if you're an 8, I want to get you to a 10. So that's kind of where I envision the trajectory of Thread going, is to really become this space where everyone of all different levels of activism and engagement can learn something and become engaged with something and really find their space which they want to become invested in. Yeah. On the consulting side, I really want to work with just kind of more and bigger and more influential brands. We've already worked with one government, so I want to work with more governments.
Oh, which one?
We worked with the Dutch government on a piece of research. Okay. This was years ago now, but that was super cool. And I want to be able to just work with companies that have even bigger influences. Because if we can influence people without companies, then there's no kind of plus. Equally, if we can influence the companies, but the people still don't like the companies, then that's also not great. So we really have this top down and bottom up approach at Thread. And I
Yeah.
want to see both of those start to thrive in harmony, in beautiful harmony.
Very nice. Very, very nice.
Yeah.
So another question I wanted to ask you, are there any youth communities or communities who you are particularly proud to be a part of today?
I think in general, just change makers. Like every day I scroll through LinkedIn and I see someone else doing a great thing around the world, and I'm like, wow, like it just amazes me every time. It's like it's funny. The way that I doom scroll on Instagram or TikTok is the opposite. Because on LinkedIn, it's like you're scrolling through people solving the issues that you see on Instagram. Like it's fantastic.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
so yeah, I just think in general, this idea that I could be a part of these kind of change makers who are kind of basically dedicating their working lives to and actually in some cases they're risking their full lives to the betterment of the future generation is kind of I want to be able to say that I'm even a part of the change makers.
Yeah, it happens. So do you have any role models or people you look up to? Anybody you would want to cite?
Yeah, a couple. I think Rory Sutherland. Actually, I've got a picture with him. Yeah. Okay. I interviewed Rory Sutherland once, so that's me and him, which was so much fun. He's absolutely amazing. He's probably one of the best speakers I've ever seen live. Um, just a kind of he just yeah he could talk for England, so he's an amazing speaker. And the way that he speaks about behavioral economics and the way he breaks down things and puts them into really light-hearted anecdotes is really kind of really impressive. Firstly, and the way that I think if anyone is able to explain a really complicated concept in easy terminology is a really sign of kind of a lot of intelligence, and he does that with everything. So highly intelligent, great speaker, and his knowledge of behavioral economics and economics in general is pretty unmatched. And then I think maybe someone else like Simon Sinek. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a picture
Oh,
with.
yes, I love him.
But
Yeah,
Simon Sinek,
perfect.
I try and quote him like all the time because I think he's a
Yeah.
genius. But also like his kind of just understanding of leadership and people management. A lot of like the learning I have with people management, well, I was able to get help by him. So yeah,
Yeah, I love him. He's one of my favorites at the moment. I also
is
love
a
his insights around friendship, and
yeah
relationships. It's
yeah
just so true and so down to earth, and
yeah
it's so authentic. Yeah, I love him. So one question I wanted to ask you before we finish this podcast. Do you suffer yourself from climate anxiety? Because I mean, many people will have seen that it's a topic that comes up very often among younger people.
mhm,
If I cite a few that people know very well, I mean, in the UK, I mean, I think she's from Australia originally, but there's Clover Hogan, who created Forces of Nature, and that's how she started. She had a lot of climate anxiety, and she wanted to tackle that. Obviously, everybody knew Greta Thunberg, and she created the Climate Fridays, and it gave birth to many movements on a global basis. So is it something, a feeling that you have yourself as well? And do you see that a lot among your friends, perhaps?
yeah. It's funny to say that. I know Clover Hogan really well. Like we always speak on the same panels and stuff. Like I know her and her
Yeah,
boyfriend really
yeah, I
well. But yeah,
imagine.
I was actually with them last week. This well, yeah. So that's funny. Firstly, sorry, but
I met her in London at a conference as well. So
yeah, she's
it's
awesome.
all well.
She's amazing.
Yeah,
Super hardworking.
yeah,
Um, no, I understand why people get climate anxiety, and I understand where it comes from, and I understand why people suffer from it. Super legitimate, and it's very real, and it's something a lot of young people struggle with. But for me, I try to kind of here's some Simon Sinek for you. I kind of flip the narrative, and I kind of use it as a either education or a way of inspiring me to kind of keep working, or kind of it makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing. So I've never personally felt particularly anxious about it or suffer from kind of anxiety, but it's a very legitimate. I get where it's coming from, but I kind of changed the narrative a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's nice. I mean, and you do that very well. I find, if you take action, already you don't project yourself into the future so much, which is what creates the anxiety, really. And if you start working on solutions in the present, I think it already solves a lot of it, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, to refer back to something you said earlier, about perhaps younger people saying they perhaps don't want to have children, considering all the challenges in the world today. I've known that in my own family. I have a young, niece and nephew who are in their 20s. And at some point I was surprised when they told me we don't want children.
Yeah.
When my niece had always told me before she wanted children early, at a young age, and all of a sudden she did a U-turn, total U-turn.
Yeah.
And we need to listen, to young generations and their anxiety, but also, like you do, and like many people are doing. You were talking of a lot of people on LinkedIn, and we're probably connected to a lot of the same people who take action every day. That's where we need to concentrate our energy.
I agree.
So thank you very much for your insights, Jenk. I always end this podcast with the same question to know more about each guest, because we all add our own imprint and our own color to this planet for character or personality, what we do with our lives. So if you were a color, what would it be and why?
I know my favorite color is definitely purple, but I don't know if there's a deep, meaningful reason behind that. I think it's just a cool looking color. If I was a color, I'm gonna say blue. I think there's cool, very cool tones of blue, so I can still be a cool looking color, but there's a sense of kind of it's a genderless kind of it's the sea. I'm Turkish as well, so I used to like kind of live by the sea. Yeah, water. It's full of life. Yeah, that's why. I feel like that's a good reasoning.
Yeah, your name makes sense now. I was wondering where your name was from. Actually.
Yeah, I'm originally Turkish. Yeah, I'm originally Turkish.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And why is purple your favorite color? Is it like a genderless thing as well, or?
Not massively. I think I just saw a cool car that was like lavender, and I thought that's a cool color.
Oh, so lavender purple. Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank for your insights and your pieces of advice today, which I think a lot of people can take from it. It's been a very inspiring discussion, not only about your generation, but about your trajectory since you were 11 only, and you're only 19, and I'm sure you're going to continue to do great things moving ahead. So I wish you the best moving forward. I'm sure we'll stay in touch.
For sure. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir.
Merci. And thank you to everyone for watching and listening.
Thank you.